and gentlemen, girls and boys, and assembled company, tonight's Hakawachi, storyteller is the incomparable, the amazing, the fantastic Dawn Ellis.
Applause for Dawn. Thank you. I'm delighted to be your Hakawachi for this evening. I didn't know that word before, but I do now. So it's really lovely to see you all. And if you could mute yourselves up if you're not me, that would be brilliant. Oh, brilliant. Okay, thank you. So now I have become completely taken over by cats this week. I don't know why. I wasn't intending to tell stories about cats, but suddenly the cat stories came to me. So hi. So I'm going to be telling stories about cats. And I have, Louis, you may like this beautiful book, which belonged to my mother a long time ago. And it's a book of nursery rhymes. And it has a wonderful picture of a cat playing a musical instrument, a cello, at the bottom. So it occurred to me that I just have to tell stories about cats. So are you ready for some stories about cats? Just say yes. Yes, I can see you jumping up and down. Good. All right, let me tell you my first story. And my first story, you know how cats usually rule everything and know everything? Well, this cat was in a bit of trouble. So I'm going to tell you the story about the baker cat. Now, there was once in a town somewhere in the world, there was once a baker, and he was a bad-tempered baker, and he had a wife, and she was a very lazy wife, and they ran a bakery. Now, they had a cat, and the cat didn't even have a name. They just used to call him mangy old cur, flea bag, cloth ears, useless cat. Where's that useless cat? And those were the only names he ever had. Oh, we can go like that every so often. Oh, poor cat. And he was made to do all the work. So from morning till night, the cat washed up, swept the floor, looked for mouse holes, set traps, pounded the dough. He did everything in the baker's shop, including cooking. And he was, as you can imagine, exhausted. And at night, the baker threw him into the storeroom, where all the stores were kept, all the sugar, the flour, the chocolate, the nuts, threw him into that. And he said, right, he said, now you can earn your keep, you mangy cur. Earn your keep by catching mice. Well, as you can imagine, the poor cat was so exhausted at the end of the day that he was no match for those rude and frisky and feisty mice who would just go, nah, 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 stick their tongues out. They would turn their backs on him and do rude things with their tails to him. And the poor cat couldn't even stretch out a claw to catch any of the mice. Well, he got thinner and thinner because, as the baker said, the smaller the catch, the smaller the breakfast. And so every so often, the cat would catch a very elderly mouse. And once he found a dead mouse and he bit off its tail and he had it ready for the baker in the morning. But generally, he just got a tiniest little bit of food, not even a tasty fish for breakfast. So he got thinner and thinner and more overtired. You know what that's like. And one day, he was lying, trying to keep himself awake in the storeroom at night, and he thought about his lot and how hard he was working. And a little tear trickled out of the corner of that cat's eye. Yeah, it did. And the mice felt sorry for the cat. And the mother mice said, we don't be unkind to people who are crying. We don't do that. And so they hatched a plan between them. And one of them patted the cat on its nose and woke him up, and then stepped back quickly and said, "We have a cunning plan, Mr. Cat. We have a cunning plan, but we need to make a deal with you. If you will be sure not to catch us and run after us, we will get you out of this mess." And the cat said, "Anything, just get me out of this." And so the mice ran off, and they ran scampering away to the shop next door. And the shop next door sold everything you need for knitting and sewing. Everything. And they broke in through a window, and they got some stuff, and they took it back, and they ran back into the storeroom. And for the rest of the night, all you could hear was, "No, this way. No, you pull. I need the grey. Well, what about the black? We need more black. No, you pull it under and over. Shh, you'll wake somebody. Come on, let's do it. You would have heard that. The cat didn't hear anything because he was fast asleep. In the morning, when the baker opened the storeroom and said, "Right, you lazy cur, right. Did you catch any mice over the night?" The cat, he held up 5 mouse tails. And what do you think they were made out of? They were made out of thread. Those clever mice had gone next door, and they had made little tails out of thread, and they'd plaited the thread, and they had one in black, and they had one in brown, and some others in grey, and they had made mouse tails out of thread from the next door shop. And the baker, he went, "Oh, that's quite good. Did I say the bigger the catch, the bigger the breakfast?" Said the cat. "Meow." And so the baker said, "All right, what's it going to be? Kippers and cream?" "Meow," said the cat. And so the baker gave the cat a delicious dish of kippers and cream. Oh, the cat was so pleased. The cat was so pleased. And so it went on day after day. The cat became very happy and fat. The mice were delighted because they weren't being chased any longer. The baker was happy because the cat was working very hard because he was being well fed. Even the baker's wife was happy. And she hated everybody. She hated the cat. She only kept the cat because she hated mice more. And in fact, if ever she saw a mouse, she would go, "Ah!" and jump on a chair. So everybody was happy. Even the customers were happy because the baker and his wife were not so bad-tempered. And this went on beautifully until, there's always an until, isn't there? Until one day, the baker said to the cat, "Right, 30 jam tarts, 40 meringues, and 48, that's 4 dozen, walnut brownies." And the cat went into the storeroom and he looked in the big tin canisters. You know those big tin canisters they have in storerooms? And he looked in and there was no sugar. And he looked in the flour one and there was no flour. There was no nuts and there was no chocolate. And why do you think that was? The mice had been having enormous parties for all their friends and families, and they've got a lot of friends and families to celebrate not being eaten, and they'd eaten everything. The cat, he knew what was coming to him, and when the baker found that he had not baked anything, he said, "Right, where are you, you cloth ears, you useless, you mangy cur, you terrible fluff bag?" And the cat was hiding. And the baker said, "If you do not make me the tarts, the meringues, and the walnut brownies by first thing tomorrow morning, I will make you into some fur gloves." "Don't worry," said the mice. "We have a cunning plan." A cunning plan. And that night they skittered and scattered to the shop next door. But this time they didn't get the brown and the grey and the black thread. They got themselves some pink wool. And they came back and they plaited and they put it over and under and they went, pull, pull. No, that's too long. No, no, not as short as that. And they tried to keep their voices down. And in the morning, the baker, he opened the door and the cat went, and the baker said, no tarts, no meringues, no walnut brownies. You come here, you mangy cur. And the cat ran straight into the storeroom and he lifted up the tin and the baker looked in and what do you think he found? Pink, wriggly, wormy things at the bottom of the canister. And he looked in the other canister where the nuts usually were. Pink worms in the bottom of that. Pink worms in all the canister. And the baker said, we're infested with worms. Fortunately, he didn't try and pick any of them up, or he would have found that they were made of wool. He didn't try and pick any of them up. And the baker's wife came in and went, worms, no, no. And then all the mice came out and ran at the baker's wife, and she ran screaming from the shop. We're getting out of here, husband. This is a terrible place. And they packed the car and they went away and they were never seen again. And then the mice, they gathered round the cat and they said, you'll have to keep shop now. And the cat said, yes, I think I will. And the mice said, but what name will you put over the door? We only know that you're called Cloth Ears and Mangy Furball and Useless Cat. Is that your name? And the cat said, no, my name is Augustus Caesar III. And the mice said, it doesn't really trip off the tongue, does it? And so they shortened it and they called the bakery Gus's Cakes, and it did very well indeed. Thank you very much. And that's my first story. You can unmute yourself for a second or two if you like, while I ask John Rowe a question, and that is, I can only see you on my screen. Am I the biggest person on the screen when I am speaking, or is it John Rowe that we can see?
No, you are huge. Depends if someone is looking at the gallery. It depends how you have your screen.
Okay.
If you have it speaker view,
Yeah.
you take up the whole screen.
Good.
If you have it on gallery view, you see as many people as if you're on a big computer, you see everyone. If you're on a phone, you see about 4 people.
Great. Because on my screen,
and
I
so
can
on and so forth.
Yeah.
I can see you, Waleed, and Donald at the moment. I cannot see Louis. Hello, Louis. Unless I move the screen along one.
Yes.
And then and I cannot see Baba C. But Baba C will be on the same screen as Louis. But don't worry, that was a long answer to a very short question.
Yes,
you're perfectly fine, Dawn. Please tell us another story.
I will. I'm going to tell you another story about a so now you can all mute up again. And this is a different cat. And this is a cat who lived in Cornwall. Now, if you don't live in the UK, you may not know that Cornwall is that long foot-like bit that hangs down in the southwest of our country. And it's full of people go fishing a lot. Traditionally, they all earned their money by fishing and also by tin mines. But it's got so much coast around it, it's just like a foot coming out like that, something like that. It's got so much coast around it that, as you can imagine, most of the people traditionally have earned their living by fishing. So fish, very important in Cornwall. There is, and this is a true story. It's a literally true story. And it's about a small fishing village there called, well, it's spelt Mousehole, but it's pronounced in Cornwall, Mousehole, because that's how they pronounce Mousehole in Cornwall. And the reason it's called Mousehole is that it's a beautiful little harbour so much surrounded by the high walls of the harbour that there's only a very small hole for the boats to get in and out, the fishing boats. And so it's a bit like a mouse hole. And that's why it's called Mousehole or Mousehole. Now, Mousehole is a fishing village and always was a fishing village. And they've always been prosperous and they earned their living for many years fishing. One winter, a long time ago, it was I think it was 400 years ago. Yeah, 400 years ago, there was a terrible winter with storms, winds lashing the whole coastline, rain, and it went on and on and on and on. It went on for so long that although it's true, the storm didn't really come into the little harbour because it was so well protected. So the fishing boats were okay inside the harbour. They couldn't get out. They couldn't get out because if they tried to get through that tiny little hole out to the wild sea, they would be smashed to pieces by this terrible storm. And so the weeks went by and the fishermen weren't able to go out, and the people started to get hungry because they mainly lived on fish. And then they thought, we can't have fish. I suppose we ought to have some vegetables. And then they ate all the vegetables that they had, and there wasn't really much else to eat. They had a bit of bread, but that was all. They started to get hungry. And as they started to get hungry, so did the cats in the town, started to get very hungry. And there was one particular cat called Mauser, and she was an elderly female cat, and she had a human, and her human was called Tom, and he was an elderly ex-fisherman. Lovely guy, and they lived very happily together in this little cottage, but they didn't have much to eat. And as the time went on, old Tom would look out of the window and he'd still see the storm coming in and lashing the sides of the walls of the harbour. And one day he got his cat and he said, "Well, now, my handsome." He was a very polite and kind man, and he knew that you must always speak politely to cats. "Well, now, my handsome Mauser," he said, "there's nothing for it." He said, "I'm going to go out. I'm going to go out into that storm. And it has to be me because all my children have upped and left home now. So I don't have anyone but you, my friend Mauser. So I'm going to go, and I'm not going to come back unless I've got a boat full of fish. And then we will feast, my dear, my lover." Well, Mauser went, meow. And then she went, because she wanted to tell him that she would come with him. Because she thought, what would be the point in staying in this lovely cottage on my own without my Tom? And so the following morning, very early, they set off. Really, it wasn't even daybreak, and it was winter, winter over here in Cornwall. The mornings don't really start until 7 in the morning, and it was 6 o'clock, so it was dark when they boarded their little boat. And Tom was putting on his great sweater and his waterproofs, and Mauser, she went up to the front of the boat and she started looking out towards the mouse hole itself, the entrance to the harbour. And she could see the waves lashing outside, and she thought, that storm, it's a cat. It's a ferocious storm cat, she said. I can see now I'm closer. It's a mad, wild storm cat, and he doesn't know how to stop. And he'll just go on and on. He won't know when to stop. So she stood up at the front of that fishing boat. And as they approached that terrifying, storm-lashed entrance to the harbour, she began to sing. She began to sing to the tomcat, that storm cat, in the way she'd often calmed down tomcats in her long and very interesting life. And so as she sang like this, and we can all join in. That's how she sang, very beautifully, like that. And the storm cat, he heard it. And he paused long enough for them to get out into that stormy sea. Now, for the rest of that day, the storm cat, he played with them. He wasn't going to sink them because he kept hearing the singing. And you know what cats are like. They don't kill their prey immediately, do they? They play with it. And so every time the storm cat got too rough, Mauser would lift up her beautiful voice and she would sing again like this. And the storm cat, he would calm down. And then they got to the great fishing grounds. And Tom, he said to Mauser, "Mauser, my lover," he said, keep singing, because we need to put our nets out safely." And so she sang beautifully. I won't do it again right now, but she sang really beautifully. I know. All right, I will, Babasi. she sang. And then it came time for the nets to come in. And as they began to pull the nets in, there were so many fish in those nets. There were so many fish that the fish started poking up their heads above the water. And it was getting dark, and there were stars overhead, and there were fish poking up their heads out of that black sea. And they hauled in the nets, and Tom, he threw them all over the bottom of that boat, and there they were, green and silver and dark and grey all over the boat bottom. Oh, and Mauser, she looked at them and she began thinking about fried sardines and maybe baked mackerel and fish stew and bits of ling, because those are all the fish that come around the coast of Cornwall. And she thought maybe a bit of crab. Oh. And then she thought, but the storm cat is going to kill us. He's going to sink us before we get home. He's not going to let us get home. What are we going to do? And they started for home, and sure enough, the storm cat started playing again, playing in a very rough way, and the waves were coming up as high as the mast. And so she was looking down at the fish, and as she looked down at the fish, she couldn't help herself thinking of the fish dinner, and she started purring. I don't know if you can hear that. It's me purring. You can all do it just by rolling your tongue against the back. She started purring as she thought of those fish dinners. The storm cat heard the purring. Now, he had not heard anyone purring since the beginning of time itself, because if you think about it, cats and storms don't really go together. And so he hadn't heard anybody purring. And so he stopped. And then the more she purred, the more he remembered what it was like at the beginning of time when the world was being made, and he was a kitten, he was a storm kitten. And he remembered his mother and how she'd purred, and she used to sing him to sleep with her purring. He began to calm down. And after a while, he dropped his wild paws and he stopped lashing the waves. And so by the time they went within sight of the harbour and they could see that narrow little gap into the harbour, the storm cat was purring too. And as he purred, the wind dropped, and all you could hear was a sort of rumbling sound coming as the waves died down and the storm died down. And as they went into the harbour, the water was as calm as you would please. And there on the harbour were all the inhabitants of Mousel, waiting for Tom and Mauser to come home. And they'd all lit lamps and candles, and there were lights all over the place. And they said, "We're waiting for you, my lover, waiting for you to come home." And Tom said, "Mauser and I, we've come home with a big catch." And so they emptied their nets all over the harbour side. And that night, the whole town had a certain kind of pie for the first time. They put all the catch into an enormous pie for them all to eat, with pastry on the top. And sticking out of the top of the pie were heads of fish, just like the heads of the fish that had come up out of the water. Do you remember? On the fishing grounds, and looked up at that night sky. And they called that pie Stargazy Pie. It's called Stargazy Pie. And that is a real pie. It's a real Cornish pie. And if you go to Cornwall, you might be given Stargazy Pie. You might not want to eat it if you don't like fish heads, but you will definitely be offered it. And that was the beginning of the tradition of Stargazy Pie. And from that day to this, on the 23rd of December, if you go to Mousel, they will light all the lights and there'll be a big festival. And it's called Tom's Festival. And it's in honor of Tom the fisherman. They don't mention Mauser, but it was really Mauser, wasn't it, who did it?
I have a question.
Yeah.
The fish, were they catfish?
No, because you don't eat catfish.
Oh, yes, you do.
Do you?
Yeah, you eat catfish, though.
Oh, yeah. But a lot of people won't because they're bottom feeders. But
I can hear a terrible echo. Who's say again,
that's
Babasi?
not me.
No, say again.
It should be. There are a lot of people eat catfish in the South. It's considered quite the catch. No pun intended.
I beg.
But I had an uncle that wouldn't eat them because they're bottom feeders.
Yeah.
But yeah, but they're delicious.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I don't think they grow so much around the seas of Cornwall, but I'm not sure.
But I loved your story. That was, yes. Let me be quiet so you can tell us some more.
It's a true story.
And in Texas, they have catfish festivals where catfish and cook-offs and such.
You know, John Rohn knows more about my culture than I do. But he's right.
He's a wizard, unfortunately.
Yes. Or fortunately.
Oh, or fortunately.
More story.
More stories. All right. Well, I'm going to continue on the. I'm quite hungry. I haven't had my supper yet, so I'm going to continue on the theme of eating. And I don't know if you know this story, Louis. You may know it. It's called Six Dinner Sid. Do you know that story? I'm going to tell you the story of Six Dinner Sid. It's not a long story, but it's a very lovely story. And this is a story about a cat called Sid. He was a beautiful black tomcat, and he lived in England. Yeah, very like you, Babasi. Very like you. He lived in England in a town, and he lived at number 1 Aristotle Place in a nice town in England. And he lived with a lovely lady who, she was a busy lady. She had a job and everything, but she adored him, and she used to give him chicken every day for dinner. Now, being a cat, Sid also lived at number 2 Aristotle Place. And at number 2 Aristotle Place, there was a very nice family with a lot of children. And they used to give him salmon every day for his dinner, which he loved. And he also lived at number 3. And there was a very old lady there who called him Mr. Tibbles, and she used to feed him dreamies, because cats do love dreamies, which are little biscuits with sort of catnip inside them. And he loved his dreamies. And so he also lived there. He also lived at number 4, number 5, and number 6, Aristotle Place. And each owner was convinced that Sid, who they did not know as Sid, by the way, only lived with them. So he was known as Mr. Tibbles, he was known as Satan, he was known as Nero, he was known as Augustus, he was known as the Black Cat. He had many names, and for each name he had a different personality. And it was quite hard work really being Sid, because you had to remember your name, you had to remember the personality for that particular household. The one thing he didn't have to remember was his food, because his lovely families all gave him a dinner. He had 6 dinners every day, and this suited Sid very, very well, as you can imagine. And this state of affairs went on for a lovely long time. And Sid, I mean, I guess it was because he used so much energy, maybe thinking up how he needed to behave with each family. He never really got fat. It just suited his metabolism to have 6 dinners a day. Now, you may ask, why on earth didn't the people notice that the same cat was going into each house? Well, the reason they didn't notice was partly because Sid was very clever and he knew his job very well, and his job was to have 6 families, but also because in that particular street, the people didn't talk to each other. You know, that's so in some streets, isn't it? The neighbors just didn't talk to each other. So they never found out that Sid went to number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6, Aristotle Place. However, one day, Sid, he coughed. And at first he thought it was a fur ball that hadn't come up properly. But then it wasn't a fur ball. He coughed again. And his very concerned owner at number 1 Aristotle Place noticed this, and she said, "Oh, Sid, what's the matter? I hope you're not getting ill. Hope it's not the cat flu," she said. "I better take you to the vet." So she popped him in a cat basket, which he didn't like at all, and she took him off to the vet. And he sat there, and the vet looked at him and said, yeah, he's got a bit of a cough. I'll give him some cat tonic, some medicine. We'll give him some now, and you give him some at home when you get home. And so with great difficulty, because you know, when you're trying, has anyone got a cat? If you're trying to give cats medicine, the first thing they do is clamp their teeth tight shut, like that. And then they get their claws out, especially their back claws. So you have to be very careful when you're giving a cat medicine. Anyway, they managed to get some of the medicine. You managed to get some of the medicine down. Thank you, Donald. Some of the medicine down him. And he went and went home. And then he went round to number 2. They took him to the vet. They were so concerned. And the vet went, "Oh, this cat's got a terrible cough. Better give him some cat medicine. You better give it to him every day." So he went round for his dinner to number 3, to the concerned old lady, where he was Mr. Tibbles. "Oh, my dear, my poor Mr. Tibbles, you poor thing, I better take you to the vet." Went to the vet, got given cat medicine. By this time his ears were drooping, but he still went to number 4, number 5, and number 6, and each concerned owner took him to the vet, and he got his cat medicine. He was now getting not just his 6 dinners a day, but he was also getting 6 doses of disgusting medicine a day. Now, the vet, who, like all vets, was very overworked, was not a silly man, and he had noticed that the same black Tom with the same cough was coming back with 6 different owners. And so he rang up the owners and he said, which one of you actually owns this cat? Because he's been to me under 6 aliases this same week. And I'm a bit concerned. I don't know who I should bill. And the 6 owners went, "Well, he's mine, he's mine, he's mine." And the vet said, "Oh, no, I think you'll find that he's been playing a trick and pulling the wool over your eyes. This is the same cat." Now, the owners were furious. They were absolutely furious. They were furious with Sid. They were very embarrassed because he'd made a fool of them. And for the first time in their lives, they got together in the street outside their houses. They were a bit awkward because they didn't really know what to say to each other, as you can imagine. They were very sort of, "Oh, hello. Yes, we seem to have a problem, don't we? Are we agreed that the cat, whatever we call him, Mr. Tibbles, Nero, Satan, no, the cat, should only have 1 dinner a day, as is fair. He shouldn't have more than 1 dinner a day. Are we agreed?" "Yes, we are agreed." "Well, then how are we going to organize it? We need to organize it somehow so that he only gets 1 dinner a day." Well, they were arguing and discussing how to do this, and Sid was listening, trying to get the taste of the medicine out of his mouth. And he just turned tail and he left. Oh, I mean, wouldn't you? Seriously, wouldn't you just leave? And he left and he went 2 streets over to Pythagoras Street. Now, Pythagoras Street was a street where people talked to each other. Now, all the neighbours talked to each other. They were actually quite matey with each other. And so Sid moved into number 1 Pythagoras Street. And he also moved into number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and number 6 Pythagoras Street. And because the neighbours all talked to each other, they noticed that it was the same cat. But they didn't mind. They said to Sid, "If you want 6 dinners, you're welcome to 6 dinners. We'll all live happily and agree to this." And as far as I know, Sid is happily living in Pythagoras Street, although he may have moved on, but we don't know that, do we? The end.
Pythagoras Street.
Pythagoras.
Was the next street over Hypotenuse Street?
Yeah, probably.
I love that. I haven't heard that before. Thank you.
Oh, welcome. You're welcome. It's a lovely story. We've got time for some more, haven't we? Got time for some more, John? Got 10 more minutes. Okay. All right.
10 minutes. 10 minutes. So if you overrun, there's no disaster. Louis has to get himself to swim in,
Okay.
which allowing time to get in pool. But apart from that, there's no time constraints at all. So 10 minutes or so. I won't cut into it any longer. Please continue.
Okay.
Louis wants to tell us something.
Yes, Louis.
John, I'm not in swimming at the moment. It's not on tonight. Apparently, I got an email saying it's cancelled today.
Oh, you're not swimming today?
No, it's cancelled.
Oh, great.
So I'm coming to swim next week.
Okay, you're going swimming next week. So that means you don't have to rush off immediately at the end.
No.
We really get more Louis and more stories. Yay!
Yes, good. Well, you may know this story. I'm sure some of you will. Do you know why cats and dogs are enemies? You do, don't you? Do you know it, Louis? Do you know this one?
I can't wait to hear your version. I tell the story too.
Oh, great.
I sound like a little kid, don't I?
Well, this is a story that comes from China. And it seems that there was I'm embarrassed now. I know Baba C tells it as well. I mean, we'll have to meet each other and do a story slam when we get to Marrakesh. Do that. Anyway, there was an old couple who lived in China, and some time ago, and they had a ring. And this ring was a special ring, and it was a ring that gave them good fortune. But they didn't know this. They didn't know that this was what was giving them their good fortune. They just thought they were having good fortune, and, you know, things seemed to turn out very well for them year after year. Their neighbors, you know, lost jobs and things like that, but they never did. But they didn't realize it was the ring that was doing it. So the wife was going through her jewelry box one day, and she saw this old ring, and she thought, I never wear that. I'll sell it. And she sold the ring. She sold the ring to somebody at the other end of the town. Almost immediately, their fortunes started to deteriorate rapidly. He lost his job, there was rain, all her crops were ruined, and little by little they became poorer and poorer. Now, this was not only bad news for them, also for their pets, because they had a cat and a dog. And the pets were fine until the food started running short, and they were used to having scraps, but the scraps became of very poor quality. And so the dog, who was quite smart, said to the cat, we need to do something about this. I've got a plan. He said, I know where that ring is. I know the person who bought it. It's a person at the other end of the town. And they've put it. When I've been out on my walks, I've found this out. I was sniffing away at the local lamppost and I got a message. It's like an email, but, you know, for dogs. And I was downloading my emails on a lamppost the other day and I discovered some news. Intel. I got some intel. And it's in a chest in this house. Now, he said, this is my plan. He said, you, being a cat, catch a mouse. Do not eat the mouse. Keep the mouse alive. Have you got that? You catch the mouse, you keep the mouse alive. And you persuade the mouse, maybe with threats, that the mouse must go to the chest and gnaw a hole in the chest and collect the ring and bring it out. And then we will bring it back to our house. And the cat said, yes, it is a good idea. I do foresee a problem, though, because there is, you say it's at the other end of the town, there is that wide river that separates us from the other end of the town. Don't worry, said the dog, I've thought about that. I can swim and I don't mind the water. You can get on my back and I will carry you across. I will wait for you on the other side. Well, this is the hero dog, right? I will wait for you on the other side, looking neither to left nor to right. I will not sniff at a lamppost while you're gone. And you get the ring with the mouse and you come back. And I will carry you back across and we will have good fortune and plenty to eat thereafter. Yes, said the cat, that is a very good idea. I will catch a mouse. Well, the cat caught a mouse and then forgot that she wasn't supposed to eat it and ate the mouse. Anyone could make a mistake, she said, and she caught another mouse and she ate that one too, unfortunately. She bit the head off before she had a chance to really think about it. The third mouse, the dog was there and he said, do not eat that mouse. Do not eat that mouse. And the cat went, yes. And she threatened the mouse. I'm afraid she threatened the mouse very badly and said, I will eat you unless you do what I ask. And so she carried the mouse quite carefully in her mouth and they set off towards the river. All went as planned. The dog put himself down. The cat got on his back. He swam across the river. The cat jumped off. Quick as a flash, they went like burglars, like cat burglars, through the streets, into the house. There was the chest. Out hopped the mouse, nibbled a little hole, got the ring, came back, gave the ring to the cat. The cat dropped the ring, ate the mouse, she forgot. Picked up the ring again, ran back to the river, and there was a dog waiting for her. I'm here. Have you got the ring? Yes, I have. Where's the mouse? I don't know. And went back across the river. Now, when they got back to their home side of the river, of course, the cat could go up walls, through trees, you know, like one of those marvelous Chinese films where they've got the bamboo and they're swinging and they're going running up rooftops. And she was able to do that. The dog, of course, had to plod along the streets. And so consequently, the cat got home really, really fast. And she dropped the ring at her master's feet and she went, meow. And the owners were so delighted to get the ring back because even they had figured out that that was the issue. And they said, oh, you're so clever. Oh, a beautiful cat. Clever and beautiful. Oh, how marvelous. We owe everything to you. Sit on this wonderful cushion. Here, have this delicious food to eat. And the cat went, meow, and sat there. And then shortly afterwards, the dog came panting back, great tongue lolling out, covered in mud from the river, filthy, soaking wet, and started putting muddy footprints all over the house and shaking himself all over the place. Ah, said the owners, you filthy animal. How could you come in that state? Look at the lovely clean cat. Why can't you be more like the clean cat? And they beat the dog. Did the cat say anything? No. The cat sat there on her cushion going, oh, that's a shame, looking at her nails. Yeah, never mind. Well, did the dog forgive her? No. There are some things you can't forgive. And that is why he and every dog after him has always hunted and chased cats whenever they can. And that's the reason cats and dogs are enemies.
And just so you know, my story is an entirely different take. It's based on an old Southern tale from the United States. But that's a great tale. I like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I like it. I'm going to tell one more story, although we've only got a few more minutes to go. Since we've been talking about neighbours, I've got a little list here. I've got 9 potential stories I could tell. I wish I could tell them all. But I'm going to tell one about neighbours. Another one about neighbours. It's actually originally from India, but it could be from anywhere. And this is about 4 neighbours who lived in an enormous tree. Now, it could be an oak tree. It could be a big tree anywhere where you live. And the 4 neighbours were a cat. Had to be a cat because this is all about cats. The cat lived in a hole, a beautiful hole she'd made all cozy halfway up the tree. An owl, and the owl lived right at the top of the tree, so he could look down on everybody. You know, I can't do the 360-degree thing that owls can, but you can imagine that. Yeah, I know, I wish I could. And then right at the bottom of the tree, there lived a lizard on the sunny side of the tree among the roots, and a little mouse. And the mouse lived on the rather damper sort of side of the tree where there were lots of dead leaves. Now, there was a sort of uneasy tension between these neighbours. They did not get on. The owl, for all of his fierce beak and his sharp talons, he was a bit scared of the cat, because if she wanted to, the cat probably could take him out. And if he got a wife and had babies, she would most certainly do that. So he was uneasy about the cat. The lizard and the mouse were frightened of the owl and the cat, because both of them could have them and gobble them up in a mouthful. The cat wasn't afraid of anybody. She was top of that particular tree, figuratively speaking. Now, the mouse was the only vegetarian, because the lizard ate flies, as we know. So the mouse used to go off every day to the barley field just next door, climb up the particularly delicious stalk, and there would be the succulent barley kernels, and he would nibble on those. However, was he ever allowed to relax while he was doing this? No, because the cat, just for the sheer fun of it, would prowl through the barley field and take great pleasure just looking at him. And then pop out and look at him from another direction. And he never knew whether she was going to eat him or not. So he was kept in a state of permanent anxiety and nervousness. And probably if he'd lived in a time when there were counselors and therapists, he'd have been fine, but he didn't live in that time. So the farmer of the barley field noticed that there were tracks, animal tracks, running through his barley field, and a lot of the stalks had been crushed. And he thought, this is an animal that doesn't even care whether barley is okay or not. So it's not a vegetarian. And then he looked at the footprints and he thought, it's a cat. There's a cat coming in, squashing all my barley stalks. Excuse me, I'm just going to have some water. I'll set some traps, said the farmer. So he set some old-fashioned traps. And these traps are called snares. And they're made of particularly strong string with a slip knot. And when the animal puts its head in, the slip knot tightens and the animal is caught round the neck. So he put a lot of those around the path that the cat had been walking on. But the cat just was so arrogant, basically, that she just kept walking up and down those paths, terrorizing the mouse. So that day, that morning, after the traps had been set, she went in and she was caught by one of the snares. And she struggled, and it got tighter and tighter until she was nearly strangled. And she couldn't move at all. She was trapped there on the ground. Help! 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 She cried. And the mouse, who was halfway up a barley stalk at the time, looked down at her. Interesting development, thought the mouse. How can I turn this to my advantage? And he looked up at the tree, and there was the owl watching him. And the owl was thinking, with the cat out of action, I could have that mouse tonight. And the lizard saw all three of them looking at each other and went off to play in the sun and catch a few flies. Now the mouse then said to the cat, I wonder whether you would do a deal with me. I think I've got very sharp teeth. I could easily get through that string and set you free, but I will only do so on condition that you promise never to hunt me again or terrorize me. And the cat went, anything! I'll do anything. I've always really loved you, you lovely, delicious, you kind, sweet little mouse. Yes. And the mouse said, yes, we should be friends, really, shouldn't we? You know, you're a noble, I've always admired you as an enemy. And so they spoke for a little while, and the cat said, so will you do it then? And the mouse said, yes. And this is what the mouse did. It crept along the ground. It got up away from the cat's paws. It got up on the cat's back, and it snuggled down in the warm fur of the cat's neck where the cat couldn't get it, even with a swipe of the paw. Oh, this is lovely. I'll just snuggle down here and take a little nap for a while. And no need to rush with the nibbling, I don't think. And he lay down and napped in the cat's fur. Now, the owl couldn't get him while he was in the cat's fur. He knew that. So for the first time for weeks, that mouse was able to get some sleep, which I think we should be pleased about. The cat, meanwhile, was getting more and more anxious. Are you thinking of, dear little friend, lovely, nice little friend, are you thinking of keeping your side of the bargain any time soon? Yeah, said the mouse. Are you getting anxious? I am, said the cat. I'm very anxious. I'm very nervous indeed. Said the mouse. It isn't fun being anxious, is it? It's not fun not knowing if you're going to live or die. It must be terrible for you. And that mouse enjoyed its revenge. It enjoyed it so much. And the cat got more and more anxious. And after a while, when the mouse still didn't nibble through the snare, the cat said to itself, I hate that little mouse. Let it once make a wrong move. As soon as I'm free, I'm going to eat it. And soon the farmer came back to check the snares. And as soon as that happened, the cat said, quick, quick. And the mouse nibbled through straight away, set the cat loose and scarpered off in the opposite direction. And the cat lay low in the barley field. And the farmer came, and the farmer saw that it had been bitten straight through and didn't know what had done that. So the cat then went back to the little root down there, and she put her paw in and she said, just to see you're there, so we can make friends again. And the mouse said, yes, I don't think so. I don't think I'm ever going to be friends with you, am I? And the cat said, oh, come out, let's talk about it at least. And the mouse never came out of the hole when the cat was around. The cat never caught the mouse. At the end of the story, almost, she never caught the mouse because the mouse had learned one great lesson, and that is, yes, you can take your revenge on an enemy. You can take your revenge, but never trust them. Never trust an enemy. That's what the mouse learned. Now, you can say that's wrong, but that's what the mouse learned. And what happened to the owl and the lizard, you may ask? Well, the owl caught the lizard the following day. And that was the end. That was the end. It's a real story. It comes from the Sanskrit, from India. And I just thought it was the quirkiest story I've heard for a really long time. And I had to include it because it's
remember
weird.
that.
Yeah. So
Poor
that's
lizard.
the end of my stories for this evening.
You're
I
fascinating.
really hope you've enjoyed them.
Oh, that was wonderful, Dawn. Thank you. Did you enjoy that, Louis?
Thank you.
Yes, I have. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have Lord Dawn back at some point.
Yes.
And for now, I need to announce what's coming up, which is Sunday at 7 o'clock in the UK, 8 o'clock in Morocco, 8 p.m. That is evening, sometime in the afternoon in Washington, D.C. I don't know what time it is in Scotland because they're on a completely different sphere, different planet even.
It's still 1953 here.
Yeah. So at 7 o'clock on Sunday, we have our worldwide story round. Mike Rust will be running it, and he will be in Marrakesh. So we will be sitting together in this very cafe, and we hopefully will have some tellers from Morocco in the cafe with us. Kamal, you will tell the story Sunday. Come here, Kamal. Wave. Just say hello to everyone. Right?
Hi.
Hey, Kamal.
Usual, I'm so glad to be with you, cheerfully, to share with you, to join you in this community. Amazing, you are welcome.
Really lovely to see.
And then on Tuesday at 5 o'clock UK time, 6 o'clock Moroccan time, we will have our international young tellers. And again, Kamal has actually grown from little bulbs he put in the ground, a group of young tellers from Marrakesh that come to this cafe to tell on a Tuesday, together as usual with Jasname and the princesses from Nigeria. Yes, and yeah. So I've learned everyone's names in English here. So we have two gifts, one paradise, one continent, and a happy boy, haven't we? Happy life. So I can pronounce the other Moroccan names except for Happy Boy because that's got a in the middle. So he will ask me to pronounce his name during the program just to make a fool of me because he enjoys that. So that's Tuesday and Friday. What's on Friday? It might be a friend of ours. Well, he's looking it up. I haven't even told him yet. So he will get it on the schedule at some point. It's a guy with a beard. Friday. No, you haven't got it, have you? Because I haven't told you.
It's on Sunday, worldwide.
Yes, and Tuesday. But Fridays, and I will tell you now.
Okay.
It's Baba C.
Yes! Come on, my boy.
I love Louis. I love him. I love him to life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to be, and the challenge is that in the United States, we celebrate Thanksgiving this Thursday coming up.
I'll be in Los Angeles for Thanksgiving.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm going on Monday.
WhatsApp me or Facebook and say hello while you're in the States.
Oh, I will. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. All right.
I'll drop round and visit you.
Hey, that might work.
So
I would be
Baba C
glad to
is
have
going to overindulge on Turkey Day, and and then he has to ignore his relatives who will still be wanting him to overindulge for several days running, and he will come and metamorphose into a storyteller for young people.
I was going to tell you a
being
story.
as
I won't be doing
Baba
that.
C is a supernatural being. He will have no problem whatsoever.
This is
Meanwhile, thank you very much, Dawn. That was a great evening. You're magnificent as always.
true. Oh, yes. Can't wait to have you again.
And good night and good afternoon,
Good night.
everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
And thank you, Waleed,
Thank you.
obviously,
Thank you.
for
Bye,
flying.
everybody. Bye, Louis.
See you next Friday,
Bye.
Louis.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
Dawn.
the-
Bye.
I was glad to be captivated by you. Thank All right, good folk. Catch y'all next time. To be continued. Okay, Wally, I'm going to change my call, but here it comes. C out.
Right. That's enough of this hilarity. Anyone would think it was a program for children and adults together. Meanwhile, Waleed, can you land the carpet so we can all go our separate ways?
All right. Don't lose that smile, Louis. All right,
Bye,
good folk.
Louis. See you next week.
Everyone take care. Thank you, Wally, for flying the magic carpet.
Thank you, Annie.
And now C is definitely